Welcome to Faith, Family, and Political Affairs. I can call this a special edition because leading up to the election on November 5th, I am going to try to come to you when I think it's necessary to, of course, encourage you to vote. And also to keep you aware of any new developments with the two different campaigns. The campaign of Vice President Kamala Harris and her running mate Walz, and of course the former President Donald Trump and his running mate Nikki Haley. I think that this is one of the most important presidential elections since I've been of voting age. And that's one reason that I'm sort of pulling out all the stops and I'm doing a little bit more than I normally would be doing to try to keep my friends and former colleagues and stuff up to date on what's going on. So that's the reason for Faith, Family, and Political Affairs meeting today. Two things I wanted to just come and be on the record for. To remind you that you have in Virginia and North Carolina, you have until November 2nd to do early voting. Of course, with all the political threats out there right now, this time around for violence, you may want to consider that if you have not already voted by mail or voted online. You still have early voting to do before November 5th. So just wanted to encourage you to do that. I think there still might be some states that allow registration on the same day that you vote, but you will have to get that information for your particular state. And you can just call your board of election locally, and they will be able to tell you, registration and voting details. I'm just trying to, hit the highlights. And like I said, I know that you have until November 2nd. That gives you at least a couple more weeks to get yourself together and get a plan for how, when, and where you're going to vote. I'd also like to remind people that you can't just show up anywhere to vote. You have to have been registered, and you have to vote at your particular precinct. So make sure that you know where your precinct is, and you know the hours and stuff of operation, so that when you get there to vote, you don't have any complications. Smooth sailing, and you're good to go. Okay, so I just wanted to say that first. And then there are a couple of new developments on the scene of the two campaigns that I wanted to weigh in on. Both of them this week, both Vice President Harris and the former president have something to what some people have called the lion's den. They each have gone into spaces that they are not considered to be fully welcomed in. And so a lot of the media outlets are talking about that right now. Well, the vice president, she went and sat down for an interview on Fox News. And Fox News is like Trump land, it's like MAGA land. It does not even pretend to be balanced and fair. It takes the conservative position and extreme conservative positions, really. Because many of the traditional Republicans don't even abide by everything that is reported on Fox News. So for Kamala Harris to sit there in that space is certainly considered a hostile environment. I think it's safe to say that. She sat down for an interview with Red Bear, who is supposedly, fair-minded, if you can call any of those people at Fox, fair-minded. You know, I have my personal opinions on that, but we'll try to, be some of that out of this. So anyway, 10 minutes that was him. My thoughts, I was not surprised that he was, I got incredibly rude. He interrupted, he asked questions, and then he would interrupt her answers. He never allowed her to answer. And so my thing is, she is a candidate for the presidency, of course. She's a candidate. So it's fair game for people to ask her some questions that make her uncomfortable and perhaps. And I think it's right. It's for them to disrespect the office. She is still the vice of the United States. And if you're going to invite her into your space, and she agrees to come, there's a certain amount of decorum that I think that she do just because she is the vice president of the United States. Unlike this other guy, Trump, he's not holding any, political office right now. He's a former president. And sometimes he seems to get more respect than she does when she goes into these environments. That's my humble opinion. But so I think this reporter there, I think that he was incredibly rude to her. There is a way that I speak as a former reporter, newspaper reporter, the way to conduct an interview without being rude to the person who has agreed to be interviewed by you. So, you don't interrupt. You don't like their answer, you sit quietly, and after you've asked her a question, you sit quietly and allow them to respond. And then if you have an issue with what they've said, then you have opportunity, to rebut and to come back at them again. Because what is your interview? You're conducting an interview. But you are at least obligated to allow the person to completely finish their work. I think you never did that, and I thought that was incredibly rude. However, she managed to, she handled herself incredibly well. That's one thing I love about Kamala Harris. She is incredibly talented, and she is, my favorite word, ready. She is ready. She comes prepared with, her facts. She has her opinions. She's trying to say that she, going to continue Joe Biden's presidency and conduct it the way that he has. I like to say, I believe in this whole thing that there's one president at a time in the United States. That happens to be right now Joe Biden. She has to respect that. She is not the person to come out and be critical of his position. He's going to do things differently. But these people seem to her to criticize what Joe Biden has already done. He's number two person going to do that. There is still people who believe in the order of things. And she happens to be one of them. Honoring the fact that Joe Biden is still the president, he is the vice president. He does not want to come across as being overly critical of any policies that he's espoused while in office. He is still his number two. Okay, and when you're the number two, you have some opinions, of course, but it's not your turn. Okay, so you back what the number one person says. And then when it's your turn, then you get to, make the decision making on how policies are created and how policies are implemented. And Brett Baer, he's a seasoned journalist, knows that. He's playing to his crowd, his MAGA audiences, who are not trained journalists, may not know that. But, Kamala Harris is not going to come out and just again what Joe Biden has done. Just proud that a person who's a former prosecutor is going to handle things differently than Joe Biden, who was pretty much a career, politician. And what Joe Biden comes with so much heart, his politics were seasoned and colored by his heart, and how he feels about people, his empathy, and all of that. His concern, his concern for people, drove a lot and continues to drive a lot of his political decision making. And Kamala Harris is that's what the law is going to, color and influence her decisions, her policy. There's a reason that you vote people in. And on the flip side of that, failed businesses, all of that stuff is gonna color his entertainment experience and doing the apprentice shows and all of that stuff. That's gonna color how he operates in the office of presidency if he were to, God forbid, win again. So just keep that in mind when you hear people being overly critical of Kamala Harris for not distancing herself from Joe Biden and his policies. Even today, even as she runs for the presidency, she still is number two. And some of us still need respect and the order of things. Hierarchy. She believes in that. And I respect her for that. So now, and I think he did really well. I would, I think that he as a journalist gets a C minus or a D for his performance. There's a way to conduct an interview, and he did not do it well. And I think she gets a B plus for, hanging in there and not allowing him to bait her and not allowing him to, make her appear to be combative, which I think was a part of his goal. So that's my take on that interview. If you did not see that interview, because I'm a news hound, I follow this stuff and I watch this stuff. But if you're not like that, but if you want to just know what I'm talking about, YouTube has this interview. And you can certainly Google it. But if you want to just know what the interview went like, you can see it on YouTube in its entirety. And so my next, Donald Trump's, time in the lion's den was the young vision. The President Hispanic Audience Television Network. And so he appeared there in a town hall where he answered questions, from the audience. And, many Hispanics have traditionally in the United States been, they voted Republican as block, not, individually, that's block. But it is important that this time around, many of them are distancing themselves from the Republican Party. And so Donald Trump is there trying to, shore up those votes, try to make sure that, he gets those votes. And so that was one reason that he appeared as vision. So, the questions were just really, stuck him, and he just really did not know how to answer them. One gentleman, he just pointed out about the insurrection. He said, basically, how can we trust you after you decided that, insurrection and all of that violence at the Capitol in 2021 when you lost? And of course, Donald Trump does what he does. He denies that there was even violence. Like, how can you deny that there was violence on January 6th, 2021? Look, everybody is calling the insurrection. Some people, one of those, call it an attempted coup. It was was an attempt to take over the government at a time that you were supposed to be leaving the White House. And Donald Trump was trying to remain in the White House. He was trying to, of course, physically, there was a whole crowd of people that were inspired and excited by him to be there, invited by him, to be at the Capitol on that day. And there's a lot of reporting, since that day that he invited, he welcomed the fact that many of them were carrying weapons. He didn't want the manufacturers that detect weaponry, but he blocked that. He wanted them to be allowed to bring their weapons on into the Capitol. The former president. So so the gentleman was asking him, how can we trust you after that? There wasn't really any violence that day. He said, it was a day of love. It was a day of peaceful protest. This is what he said to the gentleman. And so many people point out that the gentleman was just standing there, and the audience also, when they panned the audience was just in awe. On their faces, they're like, he's telling us basically that we didn't see what we saw on the day of the insurrection. And so but that's what Donald Trump does. He tells you that the sky is green. You know, in all of your life, the sky has been blue. And so then it's up to you to figure, what is it, my lying eyes? Is that really green? I don't know that Donald Trump would lie to me. I don't think this man was standing here and lie to me. So it's up to you to figure that out. Like the MAGA people, they're like, the sky is green sometimes. It's green when you say it's green. So anyway. But the audience had your vision, body language, face, facial expressions, they were not having it. Okay. So I wanted to people over, with that performance or not. But he did, he gets a B. He did show up in a tough environment, but he did Donald Trump. He did what he does. He lies. And he lies ridiculously if you're a person who's paying attention to what's really going on in the world. And then he relies conventionally, I guess, if you're MAGA, if you're of his ilk, and you believe in what he's promoting, I guess you think that he did really well. But for me, the insurrection was the line in the sand. I think he crossed the line. You cannot be the president of the United States after leading an insurrection against the United States. I don't think you can do that. I don't think that it makes sense. It does not make sense. Why would you trust this guy on a country that he clearly does not believe in? He does not believe in a democracy. Okay. If you're calling around trying to get people to make up a vote so that you can turn the election back from your opponent winning to you winning, you don't believe in democracy. Before Donald Trump came upon the scene, and I'm telling people that I studied a lot of history. I did it in college. And then I did a lot of reading of historical documents on my own. Just because the history along with the language, English, is a part of what my interest is, educational background is. And so I know that, before Donald Trump, we never had people to question our voting system. In fact, for South Africa was moving away from apartheid, that unjust system of treating the Africans different than they treated the white Africans. They treated the black Africans differently, Mandela and them, so differently than they treated the white Africans under apartheid. The United States of America, we went there and monitored their religious elections after Mandela was free. And they held an election. And we, because our system is admired around the world, people from America went and monitored their elections. Because around the world, it was believed at the time that if America said your elections were fair and free, guess what? Your elections were fair and free. We have reputation around the world. And one thing has put that into question. A system of voting that was respected around the world, he has put into question. Think about that. You have to think about that. Okay, our voting system was respected around the world till he came onto the scene. Okay. Questioning mail-in voting and questioning, voting online, these voting that have happened because our technology is improving, not because anybody is trying to cheat. Okay, it's just technologically, quicker to do some things now than in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Nobody's trying to cheat, just technologically better, quicker to do some things. He puts sleep into question. The Sunday voting, being able to go and, go on Sundays, or being, some churches getting people together and taking them to the post, stuff like that. He puts that into question. But why would you, this guy, out of entertainment, his background is not the law. Okay, his background is not education. His background is not even. He's a novice. He's a new person to these structures. And there's a reason why experts are called experts. If you want to run The Apprentice and you want me some advice about how to run a show like that, that's Donald Trump. If you want some advice about how to run the country, that's Nancy Pelosi. That's career politicians. You don't want, consider that. Just consider that for, Donald Trump be telling Donald Trump be telling the political world how to run the country. Donald Trump, people who do voting every year. When you go to these little towns, there are people who are committed to running the board of election. I'm committed to staffing the poll. They're handing out pamphlets to people, handing out water to people. They don't get paid anything, but every year, every time we vote, they come back out because they're public servants. They're doing a service to their communities. I covered some of that when I was a reporter in a little town in eastern North Carolina, the board of elections. So I kind of, it goes to my heart when people criticize when Donald Trump is allowed to vilify some people, who work at these polls. Of their communities, and then they're trying to get the elections done as fair as they can. And for him to come out of, being prejudiced and try to tell people, how to run an election is just, to me, it's really big. So, I got a little bit of a tangent there, but it's getting close to the election, and I think we have a lot to consider. Um, Forward. The difference in the two candidates very, very stark. And you just need to be, pay attention and ask yourself questions. Not deep questions, not, questions type things. You know, do you call a plumber if you have a problem with your car? Okay, or do you go to the auto repair shop to get that expertise? So figure out when is he really, considered an expert, and then, block him from running his mouth about the other stuff. But I think that at the town hall, those people were clear. If you saw the picture from the insurrection, that was not a day of love. It is said that Donald Trump was, he told his representatives, the people who were concerned about his safety, those people come on in. That they have weapons, don't worry about that. They're not coming here to hurt me. That's what he said. He didn't care that they were coming there to lynch his vice president, Mike Pence. He didn't care that they were coming there to put a bullet in the brain of our Speaker of the House at the time, Nancy Pelosi. He said, they're not coming here to hurt me, let them in. And of course, they were allowed in. And it wasn't until they began to break windows and the Capitol. And some reports said they defecated the Capitol of the United States. We haven't had enemies of our country do that. Into our capital. This country fought a whole war over that flag. And we say, if there are people who still love their flag, let them keep it at home. But they don't get to bring it into the United States capital that belongs to us all. He got the flag at my house. I don't, but I might want to. So, so you might not understand that. But I would like to do that. If they want to fly Confederate flags, that support slavery, everyone can do that at home. They can't do that in the government buildings that belong to us all, that we all pay our taxes, to keep. They can't do that. So, this is what this election is about. Some of the mega people, they think that America belongs to them. They want to make America great again. They want to make it great again for who? They want to make it great again for all of us. Immigrants are either, oh, immigrants are immigrants, baby. Many of them were born in the country, they're native to this country. Some of us now, we might be in another country, but we're born here. The country belongs to us. A lot of blood has been spilled in this soil. America, what it is. You don't want to talk about the blood spill on plantation. Okay, we don't want to get into that today because it's really detailed. But if they talk about blood and soil, they don't understand that soil. What about the Native Americans? They were already here. And they haven't even gone to incite an insurrection against this country. And many will argue that they have a right to. They have. was reminded the other day of October 16th being the anniversary of the Million Man March in 1995, when African American men were summoned, to Washington D.C. to just show, as a show of brotherhood and a show of unity. There were no accidents of violence, no arrests, nobody was hurt or harmed. It was a peaceful gathering. African Americans have done in this country. Only protests, we have had people to infiltrate and maybe turn something violent. But as a whole, peaceful protests. That's what you do in America. You don't go in and break windows and defecate in our Capitol building. You don't do that. You know. So, I mean, that was the line in the sand that Donald Trump crossed. That's a me to keep him on now from getting my vote to be the president of the United States. So those are my main points, and I'm just checking the notes here to make sure that I covered everything. Because right now, I just wanted to say, I just think that deserves to be patted on the back for taking some of these one-on-one interviews, people were saying, oh, get to know her, and so she gave her that call. She's going to a sit-down interview. She went on Breakfast Club with the God and DJ Envy and others. Interviewed. Charlotte interviewed her. It was a excellent interview. She went on Howard Stern's show. She's been on many of the nighttime shows. And of course, she did that interview with Brett Baer. I think it's okay, baby. You've done what they asked you to do. You've done it to the Lions Den. Now, I would love to see her into the Walz as we get near the election was gone. Okay. I would love to see them get back out there and do what they do. Their game is strong when they're out there speaking to these crowds of Americans. When they're standing there locked arms, fists raised, with her husband, with Tim Walz and his wife, telling that American story of diversity. Okay, we come from different places, but we rise to the same cause, to support this country, to move this country forward. Okay, that's what Americans do. We have our differences, but we put those aside for the common good. When the four of them are on stage, I love it. You have him, the teacher, the coach, his wife also a teacher, but he's coming from farmland America, and Kamala Harris is coming from, prosecutor, attorney general, the cities, and her husband an attorney. But look how they've risen up together. Places, but the story is the summarize to this place of trying to move the country forward. Okay. Two very strong marriages, the Walz marriage and Doug Emhoff and Kamala Harris. To help move the country. I think they have a strong ticket. I don't even like to talk about dating dance because, quite frankly, I don't understand a man who's married to an Indian woman, East Indian, not Native American, married to an East Indian woman, and then he has such a bad opinion of people of color. How can that be? How can that be? So I have a problem with him just on the hypocrisy piece. You can vilify all and true. George's wife comes from another country. She brought her parents over here as immigrants. Okay? So how can you be anti-immigrant when it's in your very close family circle? How can you be so anti-immigrant? How can you call or paint one group of immigrants so negatively and just uplift yours? Yours are safe and good immigrants. The other immigrants are bad. All the other immigrants are rapists and criminals, but your immigrants are good. You have to just pay attention. You know, you just have to pay attention. Um, the great one, Angela, let me get tired of hearing this because a lot of people quote her on this. The great one, Angela, said when people tell you who they are, believe them. The first time. So we have had a Trump presidency, and he started a whole insurrection because he didn't want to leave when he lost. He showed you the first time. Believe him. So that's my spiel. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you learned something. You know, that's my goal to know, for you to learn something, KNOW, for you to learn something when you tune into these podcasts. And so I'm going to end it there. Just be sure to get registered. So until the next time, I'm going to just try to do one more faith, family, and political affairs session, safety, around the voting day and the week after. I'm going to try to talk with some law enforcement people to get some tips on what they can do as individuals. I'm sure the country is prepared, you know, to not allow anything that near like what happened, you know, January 6, 2021. As individuals, we also need to make sure that we're safe on the week leading up to the election and the week after. So I'm going to try to put together a forum on safety, things that you can do to be safe. Look, so much of that that'll probably come the week right before the election. That's my hope anyway. So, okay, God bless, and thank you again for tuning in to Faith Family and Political Affairs.